The Brooklyn Nets thump the Philadelphia 76ers on the road, and a sequel to A Star is Born is created. We dive in on Cam Thomas coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there is Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And Doug, Bradley Cooper, step aside. It's Cam Thomas time, baby. Cooking in Philadelphia, 40-point burger.
136-121, Cam Thomas, the entire story here. I mean, he's pushing up against superstar here. Or star at least. He's the numbers when he gets out there and gets really started to cook. He rivals just about any scorer in the league. He drops 40 tonight and 14 at 26, gets to play a lot of minutes because the bench was pretty short, but it's like just the right time to leave him in the game because he's got a lot of points. Let's just see if he can pile on. The game's over. It's going to be easy. Maybe we can get to 50, right? Something like that if he really, just keeps chucking. But it's just a further testament that the Nets have something here. It's something we have known and been confused about for a while about, sort of like why the rotation minutes seem to come and go. But this was just another, even against the shorthanded Sixer team, it's just still 40 points. 40 points is 40 points in the NBA. I don't care who's on the other side of the court. It just doesn't matter. Yeah, maybe sometimes it's fractionally easier to do it, but just not many guys can do it. And he's just done it a lot. And we're at a point now where he is just, this is actually not even hyperbole. He's just one of the very best, pound for pound scorers in the entire game.
36 minutes, 14 of 26 from the field, 5 of 11 from beyond the arc, got to the line 8 times, knocked down 7 of those, and also kicked in 5 assists along the way to a 40-point performance and being a plus 23 for the Brooklyn Nets. To your point, man, and we see a lot of this, and we've discussed it. Why wasn't Brooklyn doing X or JV, right? Jacques Vaughn, what's the deal? Who cares anymore, right? Because now he's here. Right. Now he's established. Now the stat lines are showing up. And whether it was by design or out of necessity, he's in the starting lineup, and he is showing you games like this, man. He's in there taking them over, and we've talked about the ancillary parts of his game. First and foremost, he's a bucket getter, and you saw him do it in all 3 phases on the offensive end tonight.
And it's okay. So, and going into this game, he was 15th in the league in points per minute, right? So like he's top 40 in points per game, but it's really only because he hasn't played enough minutes, right? And then if you back it out to or you push him to 33 minutes, he enters the top 20 easily. But if you break it down just by points per minute, he is 15th overall. Oh, that was going into this game. So I'll have to rerun it real quick, but there's probably a good chance with the 40 tonight in 33 minutes or 36 minutes that he probably pushes into 14th range. Let me give you the list of guys that are above him in terms of points per minute in the NBA this season. You had to have played more than 100 minutes. Joel Embiid, Luka, SGA, Giannis, Steph, Mitchell, Jokic, Booker, Kevin Durant, De'Aaron Fox, Brunson, Kyrie barely makes it because he just played enough minutes. Tatum, Trae Young. I mean, that's like the all NBA.
I've heard of most of them.
That's the all NBA team, basically. And at worst, the all-stars. Like, that's the very best players in the game. If you just get to play this many minutes and score this many points, you are just among the best players in the game. And it feels almost crazy to say it at this point. I mean, it doesn't, because we've seen it kind of going on for a while now and only been confused about the rotations. Mm-hmm. But when you read it like this over a large sample size with efficiency numbers that aren't horrible, mm-hmm. It's just the list. It really starts to really drill it down for anyone who might not be believing that he's just like a really, really special scorer.
Yeah, you can go all the way back to when you talk about in this recent run here, all the way back to January 19th, because prior to that, he had some games where he struggled a little bit, 9 of 21, 7 of 20 from the field. Starting on the 19th, 13 of 18, 8 of 17, 6 of 11, 7 of 15, 11 of 19, 8 of 16, 11 of 19. And then tonight, I mean, obviously explosive, right? 26 attempts because he's going for it a bit, but 14 of 26. Just to your point, one of the things that we highlighted along the way of waiting for him to kind of get these consistent minutes was reminding, hey, go back to LSU, man. This is a guy, he was a starter, right? And there's always going to be an adjustment if you try to turn him into something that maybe he hadn't been for his collegiate career. Now you have 2 years and you're trying to adapt that. You have 2 years and you're trying to expand his game a little bit. We're not really going to talk about that he had 5 assists tonight and could have maybe had 8 because he set guys up really well. But
we should talk about that.
Yeah. Well, because I'll tell you right now, that part of it,
yeah.
And we've said this, and we've highlighted it, whether or not the Nets were slow to get him into this expanded role, you have very clearly seen the difference this year versus last year, or even in this game versus the first game of the season. You've seen a difference in the way that he approaches the offensive end. He's still looking to get he's still looking to heat check himself at times. But when he gets the ball in his hand, especially above the arc there, you see him, his head is up looking for where other players are. Where are his teammates, rather than being, ball centric? Where's my defender and how do I go attack him? So the game is expanded, and all you can do is be excited about the fact that we can probably see now over another 30 plus games this year. There's probably a little bit more. There's probably a little bit more we can get excited about, including converting. If his teammates knock down a couple open triples tonight, we're talking about a career high in assists to go along with the 40-point performance.
Yeah, look, month over month during the course of the season, he's increased his assists per game, right? Like, it's not a huge number, but it's 2.6 for the month of January, and he starts off in his last 2 games. He's averaging 4.5 assists per game. If this is the part of his game we've long talked about, if he can unlock this part, right? Like running pick and roll, understanding quick, if he's going to get trapped or blitzed, and then be able to pass out of it, or just say, hey, my first initial action has kind of gotten roadblocked. Like, now it's time to pass quick. We're starting to see many more reaction time. Even like the little pick and pop he ran with Giles near the end of the game, right? Like, gets into the lane, pops it, Giles hits the 3, and it's like, okay, this is, that actually was, I thought, like, really high level, because he is clearly in a place where he's incentivized to keep scoring, right? Like, you got a lot of points. You have a lot of points here, and every point after this starts to get into the, elite category of few guys that have done it. For him to kind of even pass out of that action just means that it's instinctually coming easier. And we've already seen it. And once he unlocks this part, even on, 20% more or something like that, he just becomes even that much. The other shots will be easier because you have to defend against that. Like, you can't just double team him and know that nothing's going to happen. It's like we're getting into really special territory here. And it's just really, really cool to watch.
Yeah, the fact that he's able to hit the high difficulty shots, that's fantastic. But there's a world where right now 50% of his shots are high degree of difficulty. That'll get closer to 30 as you start to have these other aspects of your game come in, because then you have to respect it's not just going to be about him. It's going to be about what he can set up, including, by the way, just quickly before we move into a lot of other players, including Ben Simmons getting back on the court tonight. But you mentioned about those blitzing actions. I think the next phase of that is going to be not only getting the ball out of his hands when the double team comes, but then what's your action after that? Because when you get 2 guys coming at you, and especially if you get it into, say, a Ben Simmons or someone with decent to higher level ball handling, now you're talking about making yourself available on back cuts, getting towards the basket, and finding yourself some easy access as well. So excellent, excellent game. Superstar level game from Cam Thomas. We've seen it before. That now marks his 7th career 40-plus point game, just 22 years old. Coming up here in a second, it was the return of Ben Simmons. It was a dominant in a Joel Embiid-less game performance from one Nic Claxton. We'll cover all of the key contributors here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn. Look, LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It's a huge network, more than 1 billion professionals, making it the best place to hire, get access to professionals you can't really find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy, really intuitive as well. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's for all you math people out there. That's less than a day. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats these days, you maybe sometimes don't have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn helps you constantly find ways to make the process easier. Just helps you find a new feature, too, that helps you write job descriptions. And so just making it easier and easier every step of the way. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Also want to let you know that this show is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Look, right now, therapy could be different for everyone, especially as we enter the new year. Sometimes we're just trying to get things off our chests, those big things, the small things. Sometimes the small stuff even really starts to get to you, and you can let it kind of fester and sit there for a while, not be easy to just kind of not deal with it. You got to let it out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. Want to let you know today that BetterHelp is there to help you for this and with this. If you're just actually upset, if you want to like authentically sort of relate to yourself, you want to deal with your emotions better, if you want to avoid some of those things that you don't like doing in your life and really embrace the things and the positives in your life as well, this is where BetterHelp can jump in and help you as well. They're going to match you up with a licensed therapist and you are good to go. You can switch at any time too. No big deal. That's where BetterHelp wants to have this work for you. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online, designed to be flexible, totally suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. You're going to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
All right, so as we continue our post-game coverage of the Brooklyn Nets, a dominant performance, not only from Cam Thomas, but the team overall as they take down the 76ers on the road, 136-120 victory, 121 victory, excuse me. Reminder, you go over to WeGotNets.com, where you can pick yourself up a free ebook, 5 stories in 5 days, all about key moments throughout the Brooklyn Nets franchise history, even going back to those jersey days. And it'll also keep you up to date on some of the new features we have rocking over there. So check out WeGotNets.com. Now, the other thing that happened here, Doug, was good performances from everybody else. Let's talk about Ben Simmons here, because the old dial the meter up, dial it back down, dial it back up again. He obviously had the knee contusion concerns, comes back, plays in this game, and gives you another type of performance that is at least encouraging. Where do you stand now after the elation of that first game? Are we now just in the territory of, hey, keep showing me good minutes, show me the pace and all those things, right? Like, and I'm not trying to downplay it, but it's like, but that's where we're at now, right? Show me another game, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in a row, and we can start to envision this actually having an impact on the back half of this season.
Yeah, look, we said it for forever. Like, the Nets are clearly better with him on the court, right? I don't think that's unassailable at this point, especially with their current roster. They need him in a way that they need anybody, like, live bodies as much as possible. They particularly need his set of skills. Mm-hmm. He's been, I think, plus 25 in the 32 minutes that he's been out there on the court since returning from injury. The pace is lightning fast. The energy level, everyone seems to sort of like level up from an energy perspective when he's on the court. I don't think that I'm really glad this performance didn't happen first. I'm glad the other one was sort of like the first game, and I'll get my camera working back here again in a sec. But I'm glad that this was the first game and not the other one. If I'm going to take one dig at this, it's going to be that 14 minutes and 0 shots is like, kind of concern territory. But in terms of like just overall, just a performance, I mean, the Nets just clearly need him.
Oh, of course, right? We talk about, as you say, pushing the tempo, finding open shooters. There's one thing, and I'm going to put this into the category of things that they need to continue to work with and grow from. We said it when he came back in the first game, going back a couple of last week, that on the offensive end, when it's in transition and when he's pushing tempo, it's obviously a very good thing. You did get some sample size tonight, and it's not to knock him. It's just as a reminder. Hadn't played a lot with Cam Johnson. You're still trying to figure yourself out. When they got into those half-court sets, there was in one play, you got something that I really liked, and then the reminder of something that needs to be worked out. He came out and set the screen for Cam Johnson, and it was right. Like, Ben Simmons is a physical presence when you want to set the screens. Does a great job with it. The problem was, sets the screen, Cam Johnson works around the curl, he goes towards the basket, and so do all the defenders, because Ben Simmons ends up just kind of in no man's land, right? And figuring out that spacing when you do not get out in transition, that's something that was already there. We talk about it when Claxton's on the floor with him, if they're ever going to share the court. But in these moments, even when you have all the shooters and should have all the spacing, he just either one of two things has to happen. He needs to be ready for a lob, ready to attack the rim, or get completely out of the way, because it actually does start to bog things down in there. Just something you want to see growth on here going forward.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So he does all the things that the Nets desperately need, right? Like I said, like getting out, getting the pace up, right? Being a ball distribution first, looking for shooters all the time, head on a swivel, knows where every guy is, even when everyone's moving. at full speed, rebounds. The best thing you can have, like specifically with transition and catching teams in transition, is having your primary ball handler rebound, right? Like if you have your primary ball handler grabbing the rebound, pushing pace, like that is one of the best ways to really cross match people to death. And we've seen that, like, Westbrook was always great at this, right? Even Harden was great at this for times, right? Like they worked to get him on the block to get rebounds, and then he'd be able to kind of start moving the ball up the court and really evaluate everything. Like Simmons does that as good as anybody else in the game. But it's so funny when you look at the stat line or just watch the game be played, because it's always going to stand out that there's this one glaring deficiency. I think for the current way the Nets are constructed, it's just fine, probably, right? Like, I think it is what it is at this point. Do we need to get to like 5 shots per game to like at least keep everyone a little honest? I mean, of course, it's not.
And he had a couple of turnovers tonight where he had the opportunity to go at the basket and it ended up getting congested, right? And that's what it was. It was like, oh, that's right. You still have that chance. Just go to the rim. Even if you get fouled, you go to the line, you miss them all. It doesn't matter. It's still foul piling and just putting that in the defense's mind. Yeah,
right. And so, like, just keep, like, it needs to get there. It has to be more than 0. Let's put it that way. 14 minutes and 0 shots. I know what you're saying, because like the scoreboard ends up looking, or the stat line ends up not telling you the full story. You had to kind of watch that there was, at least a little bit of an effort. It's still not enough, but that's okay. And that's why when you have guys like Cam Thomas, when you have guys like Mikal Bridges, who can be 3-level scorers, it does mitigate that some. If it was just pace and space, just shooters around him, I think it would be a little more glaring. The fact that it's 2 scorers with him, right? Like, I think there's a difference between shooters and scorers. Cam Thomas and Bridges are scorers, and that will mean it's like not as big of a deal. But for the Nets to kind of hit like a next little level here, he does need to shoot at least at the rim, right? Like at least try to dunk a couple times. Like that just has to happen. But overall, though, I think this has been as good as you could really probably hope for his return, mostly just because he's played, right? And like he's actually out there playing minutes, and that's for him. Unfortunately, that's the most important thing right now.
Only other sign from him too, plays 14 minutes tonight, as you say. Okay, we're not going to really get too dialed in on the minutes just yet, but did have now the 9 rebounds, excellent, the 4 personal fouls, right? So there are these little moments where 3 fouls going back to the game against Utah as well in just 18 minutes. So trying to strike that balance, that was a concern for him at the start of the season. And even going back to last year, there just seems to be, maybe it's just an over eagerness on the defensive end to say, I know I can shut these guys down. You overcommit a little bit, or there's also been, I think, some frustration fouls where it's just, I should be able to be there. Maybe it's physically or otherwise, right? I want to get to that spot. I can't get there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this dude because I know I should be there.
Yeah, I think there's like a little muscle memory from his past where he's like where he's been able to defend guys in a certain way. And he just clearly is just a step slower now. That's obvious. He's not as fast he's still fast. He's faster and more, more springy than a lot of other Nets guys, but he's not at the level he was before. And I think, and it could be partly having lost a half step, which it's obvious that would happen. It's also just hasn't spent a lot of time on court, so your timing's all off, right? Like if your timing's just off because you just haven't been on the court in a long time, that's just been a consistent problem for him as well, because he hasn't been able to stay on the court for long periods of time. And so I think there's probably a double bottom line of things happening here. But again, you hope against hope that those things are able to sort of solve themselves by just playing more minutes. But that's where we're going to keep fingers crossed territory from here to the end of the season.
Coming up next, obviously, we have to talk about the double-double that was Nic Claxton, and then a little bit of spice from one Mikal Bridges. This guy's playing with a bit of an edge over the last handful of games. You love to see it, especially as he steps onto the court in Philadelphia, where once upon a time he played for Villanova. We'll dive in on that narrative coming up here in just 1 second.
All right, before we get to that, happy Super Bowl Sunday to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Look, Super Bowl Sunday, it's coming up, folks. We're about a little more than a week away. It's all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, placing some super bets. I'm over there looking at FanDuel right now. A couple I like. Gave this one the other day. Brock Purdy. Oh, it went up. It went up on the recommendation. It was over. We had over 11.5. Now it's up to 12.5 rushing yards for Brock Purdy. Line movers, baby. Good job by all you going out there and grabbing that over to push the market. We'll give you another one right here. We're going to go Travis Kelce. No one likes to bet the unders. Travis Kelce under 70.5 receiving yards. Again, Those unders are hard to click, but you should do it right now for the Travis Kelce piece. It's just a little bit what you're going to get over on FanDuel right now. You can get also these like what player is going to score a touchdown, how many points will he score. There's so many more you can get into when it comes to the FanDuel props. New customers join today. You're going to get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's $200 in bonus bets. Got to do a $5 bet. Got to have that win. And you're going to grab that $200 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we tie a bow here, not only on the Locked On Nets podcast, but also live on YouTube, where we always appreciate everybody coming in, especially for Saturday night special, a 136-121 victory for the Brooklyn Nets. Maybe, if we have enough time, probably for an off day. What does it mean? The Nets are winning some basketball games. It's almost like we can't remember that they were capable of doing that. Inside of this one, though, Nic Claxton stepped on the court tonight, looked across, said, "No Joel Embiid.
Oh,
Looks like it's my time to shine." Oh, what's your name there, Reed? Yeah, you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna taste this. We've said this a lot throughout this season. Nic Claxton, there's something going on inside of his head. Maybe it's that he didn't make all defensive team a year ago, right? Doesn't get recognized the way he should, has a big contract potentially coming. There are just moments when you see this flip with him, excuse me. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to all of a sudden get like pretty aggressive about everything that I'm doing on the court. And you see that, by the way, tying it to Ben Simmons. Nic Claxton is a guy, four attempts, 4 makes, right? Ends up going and getting to the line, by the way, 6 times and knocking down 4 of those as well. Kicks in 15 rebounds, 4 assists in this game, 12 points, a plus 18. I mean, that's the type of box score right there for him. Obviously, no Joel Embiid, but that's an all-phase impact. The same thing we talk about with Cam Thomas, same thing you talk about Ben Simmons, just spatial awareness. Yeah, I got the ball in my hands, but is there an easier play for me to make here for somebody else? I loved the game tonight from Claxton.
Yeah, I was just counting up here. He had 15. He had 15 rebounds, and the entire Sixers starting lineup had 16 rebounds. Is that right? No, they had 15. They had 15 rebounds also. So, it just tells kind of the whole story. He was all over the place with the boards. And that was, by the way, that was only in 26 minutes for him. Yeah. Right. Like he was just a total rebounding monster.
4 blocks, by the way. Sorry. I hate to leave out 4 blocks, including one that was 18 inches below the rim, but he chose to aggressively slap off the court and like into the third row.
Yeah, look, I like that he has a chip on his shoulder. Not many of these Nets guys do. Like he definitely plays with a chip on his shoulder. Like, just takes a little extra beat when he when he dunks, just gets you in your face for an extra half second, kind of like begging for the tee at times and has gotten it for I don't know. I don't know if it's celebrating. I'm all fine with this stuff. It's like totally harmless, but he definitely has that in him. I think like the next thing we need to see from him, he just has to probably play more minutes. I get that sometimes late game stuff is a little hard for him because of the fouling and that you don't want to get to the line with him. So he's not going to probably ever be like a 35-minute per game guy, but his impact on the court, he's going to be super interesting when we get to the end of the season with what the contract thing with his like what happens with him, right? Like Daron's been out for a while. He'll return. I don't think he's too far from returning. And like, I don't know if we haven't forgot about his performance, but Sharp was so good that they was like willing to start saying like, hey, what is it? Is Claxton just going to command more on the market that the Nets should maybe sign him for? It's a testament to how good he is. It's not a knock against Claxton at all. But I think that's going to be one of the more interesting sort of offseason subplots is like sort of where they see, assuming he makes it through the trade deadline, which I think he will. But just like it's just be a subplot of like sort of where he lands. Because when he has games like this, you're like, oh man, this is like sort of elite stuff that he's bringing to the table. I don't know if it's consistent enough, but he definitely has it in him. And so, and because like his ceiling is so high with some of this defensive stuff and getting on the boards, it's just going to be interesting. I just don't probably have to wait to the offseason to figure out where we finally land, but this is clearly one of his best performances.
Yeah, he's got 4 out of his last 5 games, double performances going back to the Minnesota game where they lost, obviously, but 11-16 from there. And then also gave you 17-8 the game prior. So, and there's doubles littered throughout the month of January. So like you say, consistency and bringing it forward tonight was a good night for him. I didn't want to get too far into the final segment without getting to Mikal Bridges because I mentioned it there leading in. I like a little bit of like chippy Mikal Bridges. Yeah. There's clearly something here. He's talked about it. We've seen him in post games talk about being frustrated, right? Moments where he knows that it's his responsibility. He needs to play better. There's 2 things that I want to tie in here. One, the chippiness, the defensive aggression, getting into it with Maxey a bit. Like I like that he's there to step up and want those kind of challenges. And it looks like he's a little more dialed in on that end. And I think a part of that has been that him and Cam Thomas, who I'll admit, started the season, I said, are these guys going to be able to play well together? It was clunky when they tried it. Then they got completely away from it. You've seen them start to play and share the court really well together. And that's affording, I think, Mikal Bridges to, on a possession-to-possession basis, kind of pick his spots where what am I dialed in on? I'm dialed in on the defensive end for these possessions. I'm dialed in on a specific aspect as opposed to feeling like he maybe has to do it all. Good game from him overall tonight.
We've watched every Mikal Bridges game since he became a Net. Can you remember a time where he got into it with another player? I was really trying to think about it. I really couldn't. And there was a time where I thought there was a time he got a technical, and I was like, oh, the ref really must have screwed up here. Like if Bridges gets a
frustration towards the ref, we've seen a little bit of, but not
a little bit. But toward another player, I really couldn't think. Now he's like a universally sort of like loved guy in the NBA, right? This is why he's a great asset to have on the team. This is why the team kind of hit a home run in getting out of the KD deal, bringing him in, because in addition to being like just, a really, really good player, he is just sort of the consummate professional. Seems like he's just kind of universally liked, right? Just like good guy, like good gets like a lot of good guy points. But I just really couldn't, when he was mixing up with Maxey, it was like an out of body experience. I couldn't remember. But I was just going to ask you if you remember seeing it. I just couldn't remember a time where he really started mixing it up with a player, which actually made me feel like Maxey really did something.
Right? It's only with the refs where it's been like, hey, like where he seemed like it boiled over of like, that's clearly a foul call. And maybe that sense, as all players do, I've risen to a level in the NBA that I should be getting some of these calls here. I should not be getting treated like the eighth guy coming in off the bench here. I'm a starter. I'm the face of this team right now. There's been that, but no, there's never been. And to your point, I think they said on the broadcast that Maxey is kind of that pest kind of guy.
He was holding him, like he was kind of like arm barring him like a little bit. And I think that's where it started. They were trying to get him in the post, and I think he kind of locked up his arm. And guys really don't appreciate that, because you can actually dislocate stuff. Like if you are locked up on your arm, like you
continue your action.
The guys will get really mad about that. Olynyk went through this for a while. Like there's guys that will just do it, and guys just don't like it because you use the force against it and you dislocate your shoulder, stuff like that. But it was just interesting to watch. I like it. Let's get a little chippiness. Yeah. Let's get a little attitude on this team. Like they need this. It's funny too, because I've been thinking about this, watching some other teams. I was watching Memphis the other night, and I was thinking, sometimes I think sometimes we give the Nets an excuse and say, oh, they don't have as much talent as some of these other teams, right? Like they're not as talented. They don't have as much high end. There's no real superstars. I know we just talk about Cam Thomas, but they don't have. But then I was watching Memphis the other night. I was like, man, these guys just fight all the time. Like it doesn't matter. It's like, it's Vince Williams and right. And the other night was Scottie Pippen and Jacob Gilliard. Like these guys, they're just like all out there fighting so hard and staying in every game. So I was like, I don't know if we see that all the time from the Nets. I thought we saw that early in the year where they were really fighting. I think they sort of got away from it during a slide. And I don't know, anything that can kind of kick them into gear on just being like, hey, they're still playing a season here. We're still in the NBA. Like, let's go. Like, let's get chippy. Like, let's get mad. I don't know. They just have to. I think I'd like to see it more is what I'm saying. Like, just get physical, even if you're like a little slighter than the other team. It's going to be good for the team to do it.
Yeah, I don't mind. And by the way, in the last couple of games against Utah, I think. I think it was against Utah, and then tonight's game, the other teams have, I think, tried to be a little more over physical with the Nets, right? And say, we feel like maybe we can push you around. So I think there's been a little bit these last few games of, maybe it is that narrative. This team, they kind of roll over, right? You beat them up a little bit. They're not the biggest team in the world, and they don't really answer that bell. And I will tie it back to, not to put too much on, what Ben Simmons' return has meant, but we highlighted the comments, how the team, how the players feel about him. He seems to be a well-liked guy in that locker room.
Yeah.
Maybe, the Ben Simmons return, if you go back to the start of the season and what everybody thought it was going to be, there's something there, right? At least in the short term, you get this little bump of everyone going, hey, Ben's here 18 minutes, 15 minutes. If he can get up to 20, right? Like that's a really impactful point coming out of this losing run of saying, okay, we can get this thing back on track, right? And you need to kind of just leave whatever you've got left because the deadline's coming. We're hearing the rumors. Is Doe going to get sent out? Is Royce not going to be here, right? So you're probably fighting for yourself and also for the guys that you feel like you want to keep a part of this team. I know that's like cliche narrative building, but I think
I don't think so.
If you're players in that locker room that like playing with one another and feel like the season has not gone according to script from where you think you are from a talent standpoint.
And sometimes you just need like a little shot in the arm. Like sometimes you start winning, you're like, oh, that feels good. Like let's keep doing that.
Right,
Like sometimes,
yeah.
like I'm being serious. Sometimes just like it takes as much as just like, oh, it's hard to see it. We've lost a lot of games, and it's hard to sort of get yourself out of it. Once you do, it's like not too dissimilar than just like I've missed a lot of my shots. I just hit one, and now I know what it feels like again, right? And now it's sort of a way you go. And I wonder if the Nets are butting up against that kind of territory here, where it's like, oh, okay, we remember how to do this. We have the talent to do it. And we have a guy that maybe we can rely on Cam Thomas to get us buckets when we need it. And sometimes, I mean, that stuff's really, really pays off. All right, we're going to get out of here.
Well,
Stick around in a few.
Brooklyn Nets have won 3 out of 4.
Come on, stop it. We're getting too excited. All right, we'll stick around here in a little bit. And for YouTube, if you have a question, throw it in at Locked On Nets. We'll try to get to some before we get out of here on a Saturday night. In the meantime, make sure you go to WeGotNets.com. Gotten great feedback from this, and I really appreciate everyone that's gotten this and sent a message to us about the stories that, net stories from the history. There's going to be more coming, tons more stuff coming from We Got Nets. Go to WeGotNets.com. Grab that free ebook.
This is Cam Thomas to his teammates, to his coaches, to the organization, and frankly, to the world. All you got to do is trust me. That's all you got to do. It's also Jackson, Maine.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow in a moment on YouTube, talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah. Oh, it's the post-podcast where the podcast ends and then the podcast begins. As Doug said, stick around for a few minutes here. You guys kind of know the deal on the weekend, Saturday night special. We're not going to be ride or die until the wee hours of the morning, but 150 plus going strong. Shout it out if you have a comment or a question or a take. Maybe you're just overjoyed here. Hold on now. Correction. The Nets have won 3 out of 4. No, very good, John. With Cam Thomas starting. That is correct. So, by the way, the old hat narrative that when Cam Thomas starts and scores 40 points or scores more than 30 points or scores more than 10 points, the team loses. Guess what? That is also being bucked as we speak.
Well, that was just always the stupidest thing. A lot of things drive me nuts. That was something that drove me nuts. That particular narrative. It's like, it just can't be true. And if you watch the games, which we all do here, right? Everyone on YouTube and I hear, it's like, I watch the games. A lot of the context around a lot of those points were just like, he was the only guy in the court, like that Bucks game. It's like, hey, you want to play with all the bad players? Hey, go score a lot of these. You and Patty Mills. Good luck on defense, right? Like it's like it was all these kind of situations. We've always thought that was really, really silly, but good to have a good laugh about it now.
Of course. I had one here. Here we go. Hey, blah. Lonnie Walker is the perfect sixth man. You can put him in anywhere and be the backup to either Cam Thomas or Mikal. He also plays very well with both as well too, and contributes a lot with Ben. Yeah, I mean, listen. When you take flyers on guys like this is the hope. Like, right, you bring him in on a 1-year deal. They're already people I've already seen a lot of fans saying, like, what are you going to do? What's it going to look like in the offseason? Are you automatically going to bring him back? If he's going to knock down his highest career 3-point percentage that he has, yeah, guess what? It's going to be really functional. And by the way, they asked him at halftime going into the break about like what it is playing with Ben Simmons. And as you would expect, he goes, yeah, it just makes the spacing a lot easier. And it reminds you that if you find yourself the pocket, there's just another guy on the court here who is elite at wanting and finding you in those spots. So yeah,
Lucas Kaplan,
had a great season. He's been absolutely
Lucas Kaplan and Nets Daily, friend of the podcast, made a good point about Lonnie. And it's like not too dissimilar than Bridges and Cam Thomas, except that he doesn't get like the same kind of attention. It's like he's a great second side action guy, because if your first action shuts down, then because he can score at 3 levels, right? Because he can get into the mid range, then he just is like a sort of a good, not like a break glass in case of emergency, but like good end of shot clock guy, right? Because it's like, hey, the first action got shut down. If we can swing and get it over to him, then all of a sudden, like we can still get a good look. And those are guys are really important to have, because it's probably just, it's Cam, Mikal, and him as guys who can do that. Like end the shot clock. If I get the ball in his hands with 5 seconds, I have a chance to get something good. Right. Like, and that's just a really important guy to have coming off the bench. And so,
No.
yeah, it's been super encouraging.
And if you think back to last season, now I mean you had Seth Curry, you kept into the deadline, but Joe Harris, these guys, they weren't as athletic, they couldn't get their own spacing necessarily the same way, and they weren't as productive as they had been earlier, right? So this is the new, younger next wave that really helps balance out your rotations here. Let's hit a few quickly before we get out the door. John, frequent flyer. One possible trade discussion was Spencer Dinwiddie and surprisingly Claxton to the Hawks for DeJounte Murray and Clint Capella, so Brooklyn wouldn't lose draft picks. Is that plausible? That plausible on paper, sure. I don't know. I think we have to see where those rumors settle about LA and what they wanted to do. The most linked was obviously D'Angelo Russell ending up on the Nets as kind of the byproduct because Atlanta didn't want him. I also don't know. Like, would you want Clint Capella on the Brooklyn Nets with DeJounte Murray? Like, what does that look like to you in lieu of saying get through this season if you plan on wanting to bring back Claxton? Like, I don't think I would be short-sighted about getting Murray and taking Capella and giving up Claxton.
I think this would be an improvement for the Nets. I don't think the Hawks would do it, but I think this would improve the Nets in the short term. Yeah. You commit more money to DeJounte. I don't know if they could actually make that work financially, actually. But I'll have to look at that. And because I just think they don't send enough money out the door. And DeJounte's already on like a 26 or something. I can't answer the full question right now, but I think clearly that would make the Nets better. Yeah. I don't think it's no,
it's interesting though. And we have a couple of off days and we're going to dial in before the deadline comes up here. You respond to this one first. From the Iceman. Are these guys just extra hyped because Ben is playing, so they score over 130 points in 2 games this season? What do you think, or does he just give them rhythm for the game? I think it's rhythm, but is that what's your take on them offensively being better in spite of having a guy that doesn't shoot?
Oh, okay, well, for starters, one of the reasons the Nets were able to score so much is because the Sixers were out without Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris. So and Batum, they were out of three-fifths of their starting lineup, including the MVP favorite if he had played enough games. Didn't play
some sizable guys, right, that create problems for scoring.
Yeah, like super long, big guys like in Batum and Harris. Like that's 3/5 of their starting lineup. So we really glossed over that. And this was, Marcus Morris and Paul Reed and Mo Bamba coming off the bench. I mean, it's just like it's such a downgrade. Now, that being said, the Nets also crushed them. And so that's a good sign. So I think it's a mix of things. I think it's getting a little more comfortable playing together. Simmons clearly gives them a shot in the arm, but they were off to the races before Simmons even got in the game here. I think it's just a confluence of factors, but I would be remiss really didn't mention, we're 36 minutes in and didn't really mention who didn't play for the Sixers here. And I think that that it's pretty important, but overall, yeah, I think Simmons I suspect if you ask them, they would say something like Simmons gives them the feeling that they can go up a step. Right? Like that the team can be, X better than it was because he just offers something different. I think there probably is a lot of merit to understanding that for the team.
I tend to agree. Quick touchback just onto that trade scenario. It would work to send out $20.3 million for Spencer Dinwiddie, 9.6 currently on Claxton. Clint Capella makes 20.6, and then the 18.2 million of Murray would fall underneath the exception from Joe Harris.
And I think they'd be in the tax. They would be in the tax, and I don't think they would.
So you have to make a choice about that, but you can facilitate it, and the direct cap number would be a plus 8.8 million for the Brooklyn Nets, but that has a tax apron implications and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, so I think that would be a no. Yeah. I think it'd be a no from both sides for that reason. Actually, I think it'd be a no because of the talent and no because of the money.
Maybe
ways.
The last one here with Michael. I don't think a rebuild is necessary. I think they need a consistent point guard. I don't want the Brooklyn Nets to look like the Charlotte Hornets. What do you guys think? Well, we've talked about this. We've had some lengthy discussions both here and over on Twitter with some high-ranking Nets coverage parties about how there's many different ways to go about fixing your team, making yourself competitive. It should be a combination of the draft, of free agency, of going and getting stars, of trades. If you told me right now that a rebuild is not necessary, what is your end goal? A championship? Then you probably should consider the rebuild route because there's a lot of variables short term about what this team is and then being successful, including Ben Simmons getting hurt in the next 3 games and not being available, right? So I think it's still the most viable option, and I don't think they're really at a huge risk of becoming the Charlotte Hornets because you actually said this, Doug. Full credit to you. When you look at certain teams, because they're horribly run organizations. Some of the worst teams are awful and make every wrong decision. That's not the Brooklyn Nets.
do me a favor and make sure I stay brief on this, because I could go for a long time on this, and I have been like all weekend on this like particular thing from fans who don't want to look at down the barrel of specifically trading Bridges back to the Rockets for those picks and like sort of controlling your own draft pick. I'm not going to get all the way back into that, but I'm going to say this about what you said. Everyone in that scenario that I've seen that pushes back against it always gives me the worst examples. The Hornets. I'm not giving this question a hard time. It's just literally everybody. It's the Hornets, it's the Pistons, and the Kings. That's not even a good example anymore, but they're like, what? I don't want to turn into that, but never brings up all the examples where it just does work to draft your own guys and be good forever, which is like way more examples of just turning over this sort of talent pool. And the reason that those teams end up being examples is because their management sucks. Like it sucks. Like I can tell you 10 moves the Pistons made in this time that were like made no sense even when they did. It's like Marvin Bagley contract, trading for James Wiseman, trading away Sadiq Bey, like all these moves that just make no sense. And so of course you're going to get stuck. The Hornets never want to spend any money. They never they don't do any scouting. Like they have like the cheapest, they chintz out and everything, right? Like in terms of just not wanting to spend money. And and then they've also had guys that get hurt, but it's also just like an organization and that never wants to spend. Plus they have geographic disadvantages. It's just not a good comp, right? It's just not a good comp for what, and no one ever wants to look at these teams that have turned it around fast ish, right? Like the Rockets turned it around really fast here, right? OKC, and plus all the teams that just drafted superstars that hate to break the news to you, that are all at the top of the standings. And you don't have to draft in the lottery every time, but you do have to draft. And the Nets are in this scenario where they're not close. They're thinking about unloading, because everyone's like, oh, the Nets have lots of draft picks. Yeah, but they're about to spend them all on spend a lot of them.
That was the biggest thing to me.
Sorry, one more thing, and I was really going to stop. Is that Nets fans are clearly doing this one thing. They're double counting the draft picks. They're like, oh, Nets have a lot of draft picks. They're like, yeah, but you're about to use them to facilitate the move to get in a superstar, or superstar adjacent guy. And now you will not have those. You can't count the picks twice. You can't use the picks to bring in someone and also draft with them. And so, and they just don't have enough to do both. They really don't have enough to do both. I know they have picks, but they don't have enough to do both. And so please just look at why those situations are the way they were. They had bad management that made bad decisions. That you have to trust the Nets would not do that. And so I don't know. That's it. So soapbox down. I get worked up about this particular topic.
And by the way, and I don't see any other really hard-hitting ones here or comments in there before we get out the door. I also had the thought too when that discussion was going on, because you're correct, right? Well, we'll trade away 7 picks and then we'll also draft all these other players that'll fill this thing out.
With what pick?
Exactly. Reminder being here though. Remember, whether at the time we agreed getting James Harden was the right move. You know how they got that? Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, these are guys that went out. What were they? They were draft picks for the Brooklyn Nets that they became valuable assets, and they were able to use them to facilitate those trades. So the other layer of this is it's not just about having the draft picks and drafting young talent. It's also about building them up and then making the choices. What guys are going to be a part of the core? What guys can we move to bring in a star, right? It's nuanced. I hate to break it to you. These are nuanced things that happen here. It's not just this black and white scenario. And that's where this discussion felt like it's lived. Well, it's either stars or it's the draft, or you go and trade for them, one or the other.
This was just the right question to have me go long on this. But so there's only 3 ways. There's 3 ways to acquire players in the league. There's literally only 3. You draft them.
Yep.
Okay. You trade for them, or you sign them as free agents. That's it. There's no other way. There's no other way to get a player, right? You need to have basically a healthy mix of all 3, because and knowing that free agency around the top tier player is basically impossible anymore. The best players do not hit free agency.
Right.
And so at that point, it's 2 ways. It's trade for them or draft them. The best way to keep the players long-term through their build-up and their peak is to draft them. Because you have insane advantages around what kind of contract you can sign them to, the amount of money they can make. These guys, by and large, have stayed with their teams, right?
And you get the longest window, control when they're drafted, low contract cost, and then one big deal for the best players.
Exactly. You can do it other ways. You can do like the Clippers and kind of piece it together through guys at the tail end of their peak and into their downslide, and still kind of hope that you can get through. For the most part, though, you basically have to, at some point along your life cycle, draft a lot. Not always in the lottery, but you have to take lots of bites at the apple with drafts to get those guys in the door, cost control them, and then fill it out with superstars or like really make a splash. The Nets are doing the opposite right now. They're really haven't drafted very much. They have some that, Cam Thomas is clearly a total home run.
Yep.
Claxton, sure. Dayron, they've done it some. It's not going to happen here for a couple of years because of the Houston picks, right? And so you have to try to figure out, and it's not like they have a superstar 1A guy, which is what you do, which is what you have to then unload the draft picks for the next guy.
Yep.
So this is my only thing. It's like, because what happens is if you keep going through the cycle without drafting and giving it away, your return each time will get a little less and a little less and a little less and a little less.
And then you bottom out.
And then you have to do it anyway.
Right. Yeah. Then you have no, but and when you go to do it, now you don't have the picks because you used them for the shot you took. And then the timeline gets further away because now you're just playing the waiting game, right? You're waiting for your picks to return to you.
Also, very last thing, I swear to God on this, I'm also not for just blowing it up either. Right. I think there's like a huge engagement piece where I want the team to be good too.
Yep.
Like, if it was like Donovan Mitchell and like, we add like, a big wing and it's Cam Thomas and it's like Mikal, it's like the team's good and they're, fourth seed, they're, in the East. Like I'd sign up for that too. Like I'd rather watch a good team also. I'm just understanding that that you pay the bill comes due at some point.
Yeah.
And it's just like when you're willing to have the bill come due. That's all.
My last note here, and Ian brings up, he makes the comment of, look, we're in the process of building a good team where they're all friends. They will become a great team together, and a great team will always beat a team of great players. I will, there's a little bit of cliche at the back end of this thing that, a great team will beat a team of great players, especially by NBA standards. Typically, the model is the best players win the most. That's the NBA is top heavy in that regard. It's why you need to have the superstars. I'm not against, as Doug just mentioned there, sometimes when we're making the point about what the other version of this thing is, it makes it come across like we're saying that's what we feel is the automatic answer. You can paint a picture where they go and get Donovan Mitchell in the offseason and they do move X, Y, and Z. And it looks like what? Tell me that scenario, right? Where they trade with Houston, they get all their picks back and it looks like X. There are many different routes to take here. And I would be fascinated. I said this a handful of years ago about the Knicks. The Knicks spent years. We'll wait until Giannis. Wait until Kevin Durant. Maybe LeBron. They were always tied to what superstar they were going to give everything up to get. And then finally, 3 seasons ago, they stopped doing it. And they just started drafting and building. And then they went and they got Jalen Brunson, who looked like ended up being like kind of an elite 1A and maybe is kind of right there on the superstar level, or at least for that team. And then they made the little trade with RJ Barrett, right? They pieced it together without totally dismantling what they look like in the years to come. You need to be practical and you need to be sound. And by the way, Sean Marks is a GM for all the things he's messed up. He's been bad at the superstar version of the team. He's been pretty darn good at the building and finding quality through the draft and through the free agency. So you have to trust what your best version of your team is with who you have in the front office as well.
Yeah, look, you got to get lucky. Like, you got to, guys have to be better. Like, they did it once. Like, Bridges is better than everyone thought he was going to be.
You got to have
right?
Atlanta trade you Trae Young for Luka, right? Like, you know,
right.
that works out.
Brunson is way better than anyone thought, right? Yep. Like, that is like the best contract in the league right now, or one of them, right? He's amazing. And like, sometimes you got to have this stuff kind of work out in your favor, but you also just have to understand that. Yeah, I guess I just want to say, like, that I'm. Just don't be I would never go back to the beginning. I just wouldn't look at the worst versions of these things and say that's why you shouldn't try something. Like, you should always look at things.
To not trade for a superstar, right? Why should you not trade for superstars? Look at the Brooklyn Nets: Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden. It didn't work at all. You should never do that. No, you should still go for it if the opportunity knocks and it's right. You should of course go do it. Look at the Lakers. Went and got AD, got LeBron. What did it get them? A championship, right? Like, and even high level playoffs and Eastern Western Conference finals and finals appearances, right? Like, just to illustrate your point, right? Like, there are bad versions of chasing superstars as well, but that's the spectrum. It all lives on a spectrum.
And also too, because I just saw a comment here, I just went away that it says something about, like, you don't want to form big 3 kind of championship things. See, that's like a misnomer too, because if you had a chance right now to put Luka, Giannis, and Jokic on the same team as your big 3, I think that would work, right? So once you can agree that there's like 3 great players that can work together and win a championship, then you just have to agree that it just depends on the players.
Right.
Right.
The failing for the
like
Nets was actually this wasn't the right 3 players for your superstar.
Yeah, because like no one would ever be like, oh, we got Luka, Giannis, and Jokic. Just like that big 3 doesn't work. It's like I think that one would be okay, right? Like I think that would win a couple of games.
Right.
Like, I guess I'm saying that as an exercise to say once you understand that and can to agree to that idea, then you can now go down the list of like where it starts and stops and like where it where it works and where it doesn't work, right? Like that's all. And like I just want people to be open to those ideas.
We're going to get out of here. As you can tell, Doug and I, we're interested in this conversation. We like having it. A reminder, as Jonathan asks, hey, big deadline special on Thursday. Doug and I are going to connect on the back end here, and we're going to be doing something. When it comes to the deadline, we'll obviously have our ear to it. If it seems like the Nets are rumbling and are going to make moves, whether they're high level or even some of the rotational players, we'll obviously be covering all of that. So be sure you're tapped into us at Adam Arbrecht, at Doug Norrie, at Locked On Nets over on Twitter. Doug is on fire over there. My goodness, what a journey he's having on social media these days. In the meantime, though, I'll take care of this, Doug. You get us over on YouTube at Locked On Nets. You subscribe, you turn on the alerts so you know we're going live. It's a little bit old hat, but if you're on a platform for podcasts where you can give a 5-star review, do it. Doug doesn't want anything less. I would take a 4.5 or 4.75. Doug wants 5 or bust. Do that for us. Really supports our show. And obviously, WeGotNets.com. Free ebook, 5 stories in 5 days, and alerts and updates on all the new great content we have coming up down the road. Go ahead, Doug. Take us out.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining in here at YouTube Live. Really, really appreciate it. We are going to get out. Why are you laughing?
Nothing. No, yeah, because you were done. You were all set. You were ready.
Well, you said, just to be fair to me, when you said, don't worry, Doug, I got this. And then you talk a lot. And then in my mind, when you say I got this, is just a little, inside baseball here. When Adam says I got this, any reasonable person would say, I'm done talking. So at the end of it, when Adam says,
we'll be back again next time talking more Brooklyn.
So when Adam shoots it back to you,
when I lost
and then makes fun of you and laughs because you catch off guard because he set it up. With that being said, much appreciated.
In the air, I say I'll spike it, but then at the last second, I just go ahead and I said it.
Be quiet. Be quiet. I'm gonna do the thing you said you were gonna do. Really appreciate everyone here jumping into YouTube. Always hard to jump out when there's so many people in here because it's super fun after a win. But we're gonna get out of here. We'll be back again next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.